Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold while I hoard internet cringe. Well, I guess this is my Halloween special, except it's late, so now it's November. And I would say I'm reading an RPG horror story to celebrate the holiday, but I was gonna do that anyway. But I gotta do something quirky since I'm a big boy YouTuber now. Look, a spooky ghost! Woo, scary. F it. Okay, I'll be honest. I drank way too much over Halloween and now I'm nursing a hangover that's scarier than any ghost ever could be. But you know what's scarier than ghosts or crippling alcoholism? DMPCs. For those of you who are new to the channel or the world of tabletop RPGs as a whole, here's a free piece of advice. DMPCs suck. There's a common misconception that DMPC stands for Dungeon Master Player Character. But in reality it stands for, damn, my players couldn't stand my god-awful Mary Sue and left my campaign. Now I'm stuck writing a crappy fanfiction. Bad DMs who utilize DMPCs will pull all sorts of ridiculous stuff out of their butts to keep players from getting rid of their special babies. Things like making them a higher level so they're super OP, making them blood related to a PC, or making them essential to the plot, etc., etc. The story I have for you today stars a DM who tries to attach their favorite DMPC to the party through a forced marriage. And an OP so unlucky that this shit happens to her twice. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-horror-stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from user Sitsika and is titled, How My Character Got Railroaded into Marrying Two Different DMPCs. So this story happened almost 10 years ago. It involves my friend group from high school. I was the only girl in the group, and at the time I openly identified as a lesbian. Years later I realized that I was bi, and I just found teenage boys repulsive. Our school had a D&D club that was DM'd and moderated by a teacher's aide. The group only did D&D. But our group wanted to branch into other TTRPGs. Our group had 5 people, including me, Jack, Sam, Todd, and Tom. But the people I'm going to be focusing on are Jack and Todd. We decided to do alternating weekend games, with Jack running an Airship Pirates game since he was super into Steampunk, and Todd doing some homebrew D&D meets Final Fantasy in space. I wasn't originally in Todd's game, this is important later. In the Airship Pirates campaign, Todd played some Neo-Beoduin. Bedouin? Wait, hold on, I gotta Google this.
Bedouin.
Todd played some Neo-Bedouin Swordmaster type. Sam and Tom played support automatons that had a sort of Bert and Ernie from Sesame Street dynamic. And I was a lower-class Neo-Victorian rogue. My backstory was that I had been in a romantic relationship with the guild master of the Thieves Guild that I was a part of, and that we had a sort of Bonnie and Clyde thing going on, before he betrayed me and left me for dead. My character survived and was determined to get revenge on the guild master, using whatever means necessary. She was a sort of seduce and stab femme fatale, and I made it clear that she was not interested in romance or love given her backstory. Well, Jack felt left out of the fun of being a player, I guess, because he made a DMPC, who was the captain of the airship we were taking passage on, starting 2 levels higher at level 5 compared to us level 3s. Jack's captain quickly took a liking to my rogue, and started to seduce her. I said that she wouldn't really be interested in a romantic relationship, but Jack rolled to seduce and I had no way out of it. I didn't really have a way to say no, so I said, alright, fine, she sleeps with him, it's just sex, whatever. Problem was, Jack then began to get upset when my rogue would go out and try to seduce other NPCs to get information, or to carry out her hits. I rolled to seduce the guard to distract him while my party sneaks in. The guard turns out to be a very human-looking automaton with no genitals. I try to charm information out of a contact I had a past fling with. Said contact is suddenly very cold to me, and practically chases me out while reluctantly giving me information. Meanwhile, Jack's captain is getting more and more possessive and controlling of my rogue, to the point where he doesn't allow me to go anywhere without him, and even makes my character room with him, with unavoidable nightly seduction rolls that always go his way. Gross. Just gross. Look, there are some implications of this scenario that I really don't want to get into because you really shouldn't need a cartoon dragon to tell you not to be a creep like this. Of all the different stats, charisma is the odd one out. Like a red-headed stepchild, charisma is unique among its companions, but it's super easy to abuse. Edgy jokes aside, I think the concept of a seduction roll in D&D should be downplayed heavily. A lot of people have it in their heads that a high charisma character is some kind of god of mind control, but that really shouldn't be the case, especially if it's being weaponized against another player. I know it's a joke that, haha, people who play D&D are social outcasts, lol. But when you look at the way that persuasion checks are written in the rules, you really start to see how some of these people may not understand the intricacies of social interaction. Persuasion, in real life, is a game of give and take. When I run my games, I only let my players roll a persuasion check if they've made it very clear through in-character roleplay exactly what they are offering to the person that they are trying to persuade. And I straight up disallow rolling persuasion or intimidation checks against other players. Simply rolling to seduce an NPC is one thing, but rolling to seduce another player? Not only does that take away player agency, but it's also very creepy. I'll put it this way. If you want to seduce my character, you're going to need to...
seduce me.
One more time. If you want to seduce my character, you are going to need to...
seduce me.
One more time for the people in the back. If you want to seduce my character, you need to...
seduce me!
Things eventually came to a head when we were able to confront the Guildmaster, my rogue's ex-lover who cut her throat and left her to die. Jack had told me that I would get the opportunity to exact some delicious revenge if I played my cards right. So I was very excited. Our party is captured by the Guildmaster and held captive on his airship. We managed to break out thanks to my rogue's double-jointedness and the sacrifice of Ton's automaton, who is replaced by a sewer gremlin unfortunate that decides to tag along and help the party. We fight our way through mooks until we get to the Guildmaster and a boss battle goes down. It's a hard fight. My rogue almost goes down, but we pull it off. Sam and Todd tie down the Guildmaster and nod to me, giving me a moment of spotlight and closure to do what I saw fit with my betrayer. I had it all planned out in my head. My rogue was going to give a tearful goodbye to the only man she had ever loved, whom she still had tragic feelings for, and then swiftly cut his throat. Except before I even got the chance to talk, Jack's captain practically shoved her out of the way and started a long monologue as though he were the one who had an extremely personal grudge against the Guildmaster, before describing in shrill glee how he beat and castrated the Guildmaster before stripping him naked and cutting him open, gut to throat, making it as long and painful as possible. This took everyone by surprise. We had no idea what to say. I'm not one to play a spotlight hog, but everyone in the campaign had gotten a little arc centered around them, where they were able to destroy some evil person that had wronged them. Tom and Sam got to exact vengeance upon their corrupt creator. Todd got to kill the genocidal general that had destroyed his village, etc., etc. So we were all shocked that the moment that the last 3 to 4 sessions had been building up to suddenly got that sort of ending. After that, I kinda lost interest in the game. My rogue, shocked and traumatized at the extremely violent nature of the execution, became deeply depressed and withdrawn, still doing her part with stealth checks when they were needed, but otherwise was desolate and constantly drunk. The others had also lost interest in RPing, and the campaign fizzled out. Jack gave us an epilogue about how he flew off into the sunset, and Rogue got married to the captain and lived happily ever after. Real storybook ending. This, however, was only one of my unfortunate marriages. Todd's campaign, which began about halfway through Jack's, was less well put together, because it was an extremely homebrewed setting. The whole thing was incredibly disorganized, and I don't really remember the plot because of how disorganized it was, and because I joined halfway through. In fact, Todd approached me after the Guildmaster's death in Jack's campaign, and was sympathetic that I had my moment usurped by an NPC, and that I was being controlled by Jack's DMPC. He told me that such a thing would never happen in his campaign, and offered me a chance to join in on his campaign, saying that he'd make it fit and he'd even let me play my rogue. I should have taken that as my first red flag. See, over the course of my rogue being forcibly wooed in the airship pirate campaign, Jack's Neo-Bedouin had also taken a liking to my rogue, but his wooing was drowned out by how possessive Jack was. I was more absorbed in my player agency being taken away than the dick measuring contest happening between Todd and Jack, since I didn't want a romance from the start at all. But I thought that since Jack wasn't in Todd's campaign and it was all different characters, it would be okay. I decided not to reuse my rogue. Instead, I rolled up a level 5 space cleric, since I wanted to explore a support class. Our party was me, the cleric, Sam, a space orc barbarian, Tom, a goblin tinkerer thief thing. It was a homebrewed class. And then Todd, who was playing some paladin of light and chosen one of the universe, who was also the captain of the spaceship we were on. I made the mistake of assuming Todd's DMPC was just a quest giver and form of transportation, since we were hopping around to all these different planets and trade hubs for different quests. Instead, Tom's captain was more or less a full player character and party leader. He wasn't just a space chauffeur. He actually came with us on missions and interacted with NPCs, which meant that we, the player characters, more or less sat around while Todd roleplayed with himself. Additionally, since Todd owned the spaceship, Todd decided what planets we got to go to and what quests we got to take. It was annoying, but since Todd's paladin was at least the same level as ours, and he was more amiable to our desires, we let it slide. The problems began to arise when my cleric got drunk on alien wine at a port and said how she thought the captain looked handsome. She was complimenting everyone. Sam's orc, Tom's goblin, the barkeep, the band, her mug. She was out of it, and it was only meant to be some goofy roleplay since we were having a fun time. I noticed Todd getting a weird look, and he rolls to seduce my cleric. I fail my saving throw at a disadvantage because I'm drunk, and Todd's paladin sweeps her off her feet and takes her upstairs. I don't want to ruin the mood again, so I don't make a big deal out of it, and the session ends there. I try not to bring it up to anyone all week in hopes that it'll be forgotten, and we can resume space adventuring. At the start of the next session, Todd immediately tells me to roll a d20. He won't tell me what for. I do and get an 18. Todd then proudly announces that because my cleric and his paladin did the deed, I was now pregnant, and his paladin proposes to me. I'm really weirded out now, and I decline, citing that I want to get an abortion. Apparently, space abortion doesn't even exist as a concept, so I can't. In fact, the paladin's deity is so interested in his sex life that they are divinely protecting the embryo. So even intentionally miscarrying would be impossible. I'm starting to get irritated because of this bullshit, so I just say no. And Todd launches into an hour-long argument with me, trying to get me to marry his paladin. Sam and Tom get irritated at this point too, because we just want to get to the main mission. Finally, Todd rolls charisma and says my cleric accepts his proposal, and the paladin's deity marries us personally right then and there. No, I didn't even get a chance to roll against it. This would have been more than enough on its own. Except Todd says that because of the baby inside of me, I now get disadvantage on all of my rolls, despite the damn thing only being conceived yesterday. I wish I could then say I left then and there, but because we were all friends, I stuck around, dealing with Todd's White Knight Paladin shielding me from all harm and trying to roleplay a happy little family with me, while Sam and Todd gradually got irritated with the lack of killing things, and began blaming me for hogging the spotlight and being useless due to the disadvantage. The campaign finally fizzled when Todd and I had to focus on graduating, and I got thrown for another loop when Todd then asked me out, despite me openly identifying as a lesbian. Apparently, we had such good chemistry that he could really feel like we were meant to be. I finally grew a brain stem and stopped talking to Todd after that, and our friend group drifted apart after our graduation. I didn't touch TTRPGs for almost a decade after that, out of fear of more Todds and Jacks. TLDR. My character gets forcibly married to a DMPC in one game, and then the DM of another game who promises something like that won't happen does the exact same thing to marry my character to his DMPC. End of story. Don't good love stories just make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside? Because right now I feel neither warm nor fuzzy. What baffles me is that Todd actually thought his plan would work, when his whole reason for having OP in his game was that he explicitly promised her that he would not be a creep like Jack. He really thought to himself, maybe if I double down on the whole forced marriage thing, maybe she'll love me. As for OP, I really feel for her. RPGs tend to be a pretty male-dominated hobby. I mean, the ratio has evened out significantly in recent years. But even now, I still see plenty of women worried that they might run into romantics like Todd or Jack. D&D is not speed dating with wizards, and anyone who thinks that it is really needs to touch some grass. Now, before we go, let's take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake. This week's fan art comes from viewer Ripplebeam, and depicts a drunken Drake spending his Halloween regaling members of a local bar with tales from his hoard of cringe. When you dedicate your life to collecting the worst the internet has to offer, drinking to forget becomes a pretty common occurrence. Thank you again, Ripplebeam, for submitting your art. If you want to see your artwork featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Receiving and reviewing fan art is my favorite part of being a YouTuber, and it means the world to me that I can create content that inspires artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna wrap up. If you enjoyed your time here, be sure to like the video and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.